well. So just to give a brief introduction, like Shelby said, my name is Grant Cavall. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Marketing Essentials. We are located actually up here in Minster, Ohio, but we have been members of the Troy Chamber now for a couple years. And so we are looking forward to doing more webinars like this, and as we continue to work with that group. So really excited to be able to do this today. I want to share one thing about, working remote. And that is kind of the fact that, my favorite thing is really the flexibility with it. I know a lot of companies sometimes struggle to allow for that work-life balance with their employees. And so having the ability to work remote and being able to kind of be on and off throughout the day really allows for that needed flexibility. So I would say that for me is one of my favorite parts about working remote. And so I would say, Tyler, if you want to introduce yourself and let us know what your favorite part about remote working is.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Louth. I'm the Director of Operations here at Marketing Essentials. What I really love about the ability to work remote is that is the commute. So I live about 50 minutes from the office. So when I can work from home, it's great. I have 3 young children, so getting back about 2 hours of my day helps, and it also allows me to be more productive. So those are pretty much the 2 big ones for me that I really enjoy, that ability to be able to be remote.
Yep, because you never know what the little ones are going to get into, right, Tyler?
That's exactly. I like to call them my little monsters.
So just very briefly, a little bit more about Marketing Essentials. So we are a full service digital marketing agency. So everything from web development to branding, social media, content, recruitment, marketing, a lot of different things. But we have actually been working remote for a long time. And so that was one of the reasons why, we wanted to kind of give this educational webinar today was, our team has been working from remote well before COVID. So like Tyler was alluding to, there are a lot of benefits to working remote. Each person has their own, dynamic that they're potentially dealing with from an individual basis. So really being able to hone in on what those best practices are to, one, be able to keep, from a management standpoint, keep the business running as it should be, making sure that you're staying up on the deliverables that you need to be. And then 2, it's if you are one of those people who are working remote, it's what are the things that you could be potentially doing to, make sure that what you're doing is staying efficient, you're able to stay on task, and you're able to meet the expectations of the organization and make sure that, you're both working side by side there. So one of the couple things that we want to focus on today, number 1, we're going to be going over the benefits of remote work. Again, what are some of those things that, are really great about working remote, and some of the things that maybe you haven't considered that is also something that you might be wanting to think about if you're trying to go remote. We're also going to talk through some of the fears and challenges. Obviously, whether you're the individual who's working remotely or you're the company who's allowing your workforce to work remote or maybe hybrid inside the office sometimes and at home others, there's a lot of fears and challenges to overcome with that. And so we're going to go through some of those today. And then, we'll go through some of the best practices for engaging those remote employees. Again, you lose a lot when you don't have people in person. So if you don't have the right things in place to make sure that you're still fostering a positive culture, allowing that openness and keeping that communication flowing, you could really start to stagnate what you're doing as well as what the company's doing as well. So we'll be going over that a little bit today as we go through things. One other thing I wanted to point out, and, like I said, some companies were working remotely prior to COVID, but ever since COVID happened, Upwork estimates that 1 in 4 Americans over the next year will be working remotely. So that is a huge number compared to what it was before COVID. And a lot of the indications are saying that by 2025, 22% will be also working remotely in the US. So this is something that is here to stay. It's not something that's kind of a fad because of COVID. It is something that has really dynamically changed the workplace moving forward. So we need to be now proactive with what we're doing from a planning standpoint. So I am curious, and I know Derek and Brenda, I am curious just a little bit from you guys, what potentially are some of your biggest fears or struggles that you see from a working remote standpoint as it stands right now?
And feel free to pop that in the chat if you guys
Yeah.
want to be able to just write in there or unmute and answer as well.
Yeah, we're just, I work for the lieutenant governor, and we're focused on, addressing this workforce shortage and trying to diagnose it. And, I think a lot of folks have jumped industries where, there are a lot more jobs online, and remote work is becoming more of a thing nowadays. So I want to be a fly on the wall and just kind of, hear from you guys and your expertise and what you think, if it's affecting the shortage in any way, or maybe it's just, I guess, how employers can embrace maybe a virtual future.
Sure, absolutely. That is, I wish we all had the magic answer, right, of being able to figure out what we can do about this labor shortage. We work with a ton of different industries across the board, a lot of manufacturers, everything from small businesses to large enterprise, and nobody right now is immune from the either lack of labor or the huge shift that's happened in terms of people looking for additional jobs. I think I read a stat the other day, it was over 40% of the workforce was going to transition positions, whether internally or to another company within the next year. So figuring out ways to adapt is definitely going to be key to at least the retention side of things. And then how you potentially, some companies might be having benefits that they don't know how to necessarily show that or be able to articulate to their existing employees on what those benefits are, and potentially adding to that portfolio for not a whole lot of costs. So that is something that we can cover a little bit today as well. So let's jump in a little bit to the obstacles to overcome, and I really kind of put these down into 5 different distinct buckets. Number one is really trust, and trust can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But really what it comes down to is if everybody was in the office, when they came in, when they left, what they're potentially working on, and you always have that ability to, go down and talk to them or not talk to them, whatever it is. So, that is something that you really have to be proactive with and say, okay, so how are we going to address being able to keep that trust, being able to keep that open communication, because communication is going to be key, and you'll hear us say that a lot throughout today. Communication is going to be super key to being able to keep things going from a business standpoint. So when you start talking about communication, right? So if I'm not in person, or if I'm working hybrid, or if I'm working all remote, what are the different platforms that we should be potentially thinking about? And Tyler will go over some of those a little bit later on. But we really want to be thinking about what's going to be the easiest way to ensure that the same type of communication that you're having when you're all in the office together is able to happen, remotely. I think about some of the different channels that are out there. Sometimes you might be able to send an email, right? Maybe an email is sufficient, but other times you might need something like a Zoom or some other platforms where you have that personal interaction that's seamless, that's easy, that's fast, it's not going to be intrusive. So we'll talk about some of those different things today as well. The third thing is technology. That is something that I think a lot of people ran into really quickly when they learned that they were going to have to either they had the option to work remote or they were forced to work remote during COVID, because they may not have had the tech stack to be able to execute what they needed to do, right? Whether it was, having an extra monitor or having the right type of equipment at home or the right office setup. So those are all things that, we'll want to be considering as well. The other thing is those workplace needs, right? And making sure that, you have limited distractions. I was joking with Shelby and Tyler a little bit ago, there's actually a gentleman working on our heat right now. So how do you minimize, large distractions in the background, whether you're working internally with another coworker on a call like this, or maybe that you're working with a client or a customer? It's really thinking about what are the different things that you need to be cognizant of that are around you that could be potentially, making things show off less professionally, or not having the great experience that you really want to have when you're trying to communicate. And then the last part of that's really the social engagement standpoint. People have been isolated for quite some time now. Even coming out of COVID, people are still a little bit more hesitant about coming into the office or talking in person. So what are the different things that you can do virtually to ensure that that social connection is there, that you can be intentional with giving that kind of space for those, water cooler talks, if you will, making sure that you have those abilities and the options there for your employees, because that will prevent burnout. That'll allow it to keep some of that culture and camaraderie there. And it's also going to be great if you are one of those people who are trying to bring on new associates or employees, is really thinking about, okay, so what are the different things that they're going to need to be able to understand our culture and make the connections that they need from a retention standpoint. So those are all things that we'll want to think about overcoming as we think about hybrid work and remote work. So Tyler, I'll kind of turn over to you to talk through some of the solutions for some of those things.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to Grant's last slide, excuse me, technology things happen. I don't know if anyone just saw that I was kicked off this meeting. My internet had a blip there, and I had to re-log on. So things like that happen. So make sure that you are prepared and can be agile, especially working in a remote area. So some of the solutions going into this is a project management system. So we use Jira, and what Jira does is it allows us to be able to plan work and also time tracking in that, so we can see exactly how much time is dedicated to each individual task. So this also helps with that trust factor, because you're also seeing the work getting moved through that project management system. We also offer some home office packages. So, we provide all of our employees that will be remote with a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and we also provide cell phone stipend as well. So obviously working remote, if we're not using the digital tools, our cell phones are there as well for communication. So we make sure that we take care of that for our employees as well. We also make intentional relationship or team building events. So we have happy hours every 2 Fridays where we can just kind of go on, decompress, kind of talk through the week. We have water cooler time as well before some of our meetings, where we can come in, ask everyone how their kids are doing or how their weekend was. So that is intentional for that, one-to-one or the human-to-human interaction, because being remote, sometimes we do lose that, especially if you're not right in the office or right next door where you can go have a conversation. And technology and tool stacks are very important, and I'll kind of get into that on our next slide. But having the right things in the right places so you can easily communicate with your team is something that's very important as well. Standard operating procedures are definitely something that I would recommend, especially communication-wise, because if you're using chat or emails, what is the guidelines there for the timeline for someone to respond to you? And then it's also, training your employees on certain elements of that as well.
I think a big part of that, Tyler, and that kind of goes across industries, is really, making sure that everybody is clear on communication expectations. You just touched on that. But, for us, for example, we have an expectation around, if I send an email to somebody, we expect that there's some type of reply or acknowledgement of that email within a certain period of time. Now that might vary, right, for each industry, or depending on how you're operating. But have those expectations in place so that you don't have that lag. Same thing with if you are using another chat tool, right? Maybe something more like a quick message or an internal thing like we use Slack. Have some expectations and some goals around that, because you can't have people isolated and not communicating. It'll only lead to friction. So,
yeah. And I would also like to add, when you're having conversations like this, requiring the video to be on, because you can see, interaction You know, that's also gives you that in-person feel, even though you could be miles away. So I would add that as something that's beneficial that we found useful with how we work together as a team. So there is a ton of tools out there to help you complete this new virtual in-office hybrid work environment. One of the tools that we like to use is Slack, which is an instant message platform. It also allows for video chat as well. Very similar to Skype, which some of you might be familiar with. It's the same kind of outfit there. You have an instant chat, and then also you're able to call. Zoom, definitely another great tool. This is for larger meetings or webinars like what we're doing right now. It's a great tool for that. Microsoft Teams, they have a lot of all of those built-in features as well. But as you can see, there's a ton of options here that you guys can you can choose from. So it's important to do the research on what fits your current tool stack or what you can kind of mesh together to make sure that you are providing the best experience. Depending on, how many people you have in a meeting, or if it's just a quick call, or, if you just need to send a quick message, just making sure, like, again, going back to that standard operating procedure, all of that is outlined clearly. The rules of engagement or the timeline on when someone's required to answer a certain type of message is very important as well. So equipment that we've, kind of found that is great, lighting. So make sure that you're in an open lit environment. You have your camera on is what we, how we mentioned before. I have headphones in, so it allows me to hear very easily. And also the microphone that's built into the headphones is something that's great. We have another tool called the Owl, which is great for conferences. It's a 360 camera. So as someone is talking while we're in the office or in the conference room, that camera actually points to who is talking. It's voice registered. And then the other thing that's important, especially for people that are working remotely, is their environment. As you can see, like, I don't have anything that's cluttered behind me. Some people, they might have laundry stacked there or something that would be distracting as you're trying to have a conversation. You want to really minimize anything that's going to be around the area. I have 2 dogs as well, and I made sure those dogs are put away so you can't hear them barking. So, kind of just understanding your environment and the area that you're in is very important. I would also say working remote, it is important to have a dedicated workspace. So, you need that routine. So having that area in your house where that you're going to have that consistent distraction-free environment where you can really get work done, and I know that sometimes it is tempting to be able to, walk away, maybe start laundry or something like that. But, do that at your breaks. You can do things like that around the house, but make sure that dedicated area is available for you. And that's how you're going to get the most productivity out of your employees as well.
Absolutely. And, Brenda, I see that I saw your chat earlier that you had said that, you're trying to allow for that work-life balance and starting to let salaried employees work maybe 1 day a week from home, which is awesome. And I think a lot of companies are going to start going that direction again, regardless of COVID. So, one of the things that you'll want to consider, as Tyler was just alluding to, is, okay, so what's that equipment going to be? Because if they are going to work from home maybe 1 or 2 times a week, but then they're coming into the office, does that mean that they need a separate, are they going to use the same laptop? Or do you have are you going to have that package for them that, hey, if you're working at home, here's your home office package, right? Maybe it's a phone, maybe it's maybe it's a desk, maybe it's chairs, like all those different things you'll want to start to consider, because those can also start to become recruitment tools. When you start thinking about the cost of an employee, there's a lot of different things that go into that from a benefit standpoint. And so if you're able to start tangibly saying, hey, these are some awesome benefits of working for our company, because if you're working at home, you get these 3, 4, 5 things. Well, that can really add up. So when you start talking about how competitive the recruitment environment is right now, you can use those as potential things to leverage and talk about as part of your interviewing process, or some others that maybe other companies have, but they're not necessarily talking about. So framing those in a way that, that's really going to be an important consideration. Before I would say some of the other things, I would say tech and equipment. If you don't have that part down, the rest of it, it won't work as well either. So. I think, Tyler, and we've seen everything when it comes to what could potentially happen when working remote. I would say, we have had a lot of different instances. I'll share one. We typically will have Zoom calls in the morning, right, with our team. We kind of have a quick stand up, and everybody's talking about what's going to get done for the day, etc. I mean, we've seen people's dogs come in the background, and they have left a present behind at times. So we've seen that. We've seen the crying babies. So like, there's just a lot of different things that, you just want to be open with your employees about expectations. It's going to happen, right? It could happen in the office. So being very open and honest with, hey, here's what we know is going to happen potentially. Here's how we can potentially curb it down the road. Those are different things that you're going to want to consider. So a couple of things from a review standpoint, when I talked about what are those fears and those obstacles to overcome, they're going to be different for each business. So let's say, for example, because like I said, we have worked with so many different ones who have tried to incorporate these things. So if you're a financial firm, all right, let's just say that maybe you're doing insurance or financial advising, or you're a bank. Well, one of the first things you're definitely going to want to consider is your security. You're going to want to make sure that if there are individuals who are working at home, that they have a secure network, that, if they are VPN to something, you want to make sure that that security is there, because you are going to have different areas of potential vulnerability that you're going to want to address. For those who are maybe in the, what I'll say is maybe the services business, so like us, like a marketing company, or maybe you're doing some other type of service business, being thoughtful about that client, what it looks like to a client when you're on a call with them, or what that experience is going to be with the client, because that is also going to be extremely important. If you're meeting in person, you can control that environment, or your people can control that environment. But if your people aren't controlling their own environment, then what's that presentation going to be to the client? We hear that a lot. It's like, well, the client had a bad experience because, that the internet connection was bad or something else. That's reflective immediately of your brand. So, I mean, that is super, super important to ensure that your brand standard is being communicated across the board in a way that you want it to be. So definitely make sure that when you're thinking about, what are those obstacles, what are those fears, what are different things that, you should be considering right up front, those are definitely some of them. I would say also sort of start thinking about proactively researching to find the right solutions, right? So I would say make a list of the different friction points that you're having. Think about all the different considerations that would be going into that, and then start proactively thinking about, okay, so how do we have a solution to this? Some of the solutions might be the equipment that you're using. To Tyler's point, maybe it's using an owl for conferencing. Maybe it's using a different platform like a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams. But really think about which platform is right and what do you want it to do for you. So be proactive with it, right? Address those things firsthand. Some of it might just be operational challenges, and some of it might just be, hey, you know what? We need to make sure that we have an operational structure and we have standard operating procedures for what we need to happen. My big thing with and advice that we've seen works the best: get the employees' input first. Don't tell them don't just say, here's what we're going to do. Gain the input from them first. Make sure that they are heard, and then work co-collaboratively to develop those guidelines. Because at the end of the day, your teammates and your employees, they want to perform well too. They don't want to have if they're working with another coworker who's maybe not living up to a standard that they see fit, they want to make sure that they're doing the same thing and delivering that same quality service or product. So really be thinking about those different things when you start putting together those procedures. And then finally, like I said, document, train, and refine and reinforce it. Because at the end of the day, if it's not documented and it's not being reinforced from top down, then things will start to slide, right? So, and you're not going to get it right. Tyler, we've been doing this for how many years now? We still refine our processes all the time. So it's not going to be something you're going to get perfect. It's going to be something that you want to get good enough to get it out there, get it set, and then you're going to refine it as you go. Your business is constantly evolving, your customers are constantly evolving. So you really want to think about, so how do we need to change our processes to adapt to a changing marketplace? You know, one of the things that, and I touched on this a little bit before, but when you start thinking about the competitive marketplace of recruitment right now, whether you are a service business or whether you are somebody who's creating a product, it is extremely competitive for employees right now. So really, really be thinking about, you know, what's the impact going to be to my business if I do allow for some remote work, right? Some positions, right? Of course, you can't have remote. They have to be in office. If you're creating a product, moving a product, right? Like, you get that. But really be thinking about, if I have the ability to do that, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? Because the expectation is there, right? COVID has made everybody expect that they can have some type of flexibility, some type of hybrid work. Here soon, that's going to become more just, it's an expected thing. So if you're not already thinking this way, you definitely should be thinking about, how can I start to take the different steps to ensure that, you know, and you can do it slowly, you can do it phased, but start thinking about it. Because if you're having an interview with somebody and they're interviewing with 2 or 3 other people, I guarantee you that flexibility and hybrid workspace, that's coming up. And if it's not coming up, it's going to be coming up very soon. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time today. And if there are any questions, we'll take a second. And if not, we appreciate everybody's time today.